Just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. Now, I say that a lot. I say that all the freaking time. You guys have heard me say that everywhere. And yes, ultimately, to be found not guilty is generally the best outcome. But there's going to be some times where maybe that's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. I mean, sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Because it can't always be that way. Nothing is 100% in life. And for somebody, I think that is a topic we can ponder. And that somebody is Darren Glines. Now, Darren is, at the time this all occurred, a pre-op transgender person. Now, I only bring that up because you need that background to the story. The idea of transgender people using bathrooms, not the object of this video. But what happened? Well, Darren, back when this all happened, had gone to the YMCA of Greater Dayton, if you aren't aware, Dayton, Ohio, and said, I would like to use the women's bathrooms and locker rooms because I am transgender. And the YMCA said, fine, you can do that. You have our permission. So Darren went ahead and used the female locker room in Xenia, Ohio, which is right outside of Dayton. After a while, Darren was then charged with 3 counts of public indecency under Revised Code Section 2907.09A1. Now, why is it important? Well, we have to read the statute to figure out what he was charged with, and it's a very specific thing. No person shall recklessly do any of the following under circumstances in which the person's conduct is likely to be viewed by and affront others who are in the person's physical proximity and who are not members of the person's household. 1. Expose the person's private parts. It's also important to note that Darren is facing a 4th-degree misdemeanor on each count. So that means he could receive a maximum penalty of up to 30 days in jail for each offense and a maximum fine of $250 for each offense. After discovery and the pretrial motions, Darren opted to have a bench trial instead of an 8-person jury trial. In Ohio, for misdemeanors, you are only entitled to an 8-person jury, whereas for a felony case, you would get 12. Now that means Darren's judge was the jury, a jury of 1. This sounds great on one hand because you only have to convince one person. And that one person is not on a jury who might get swayed or manipulated and is fairly savvy and sophisticated because they obviously have legal training. They're a judge. On the other hand, you're dealing with somebody you're not going to be able to BS. And also, if you don't convince them, well, that's it. There are no other jurors you can try to convince to support you and maybe get a hung jury. You either get acquitted or you get convicted in a bench trial. There is no, well, I don't know. There is none of that. This is it. After the bench trial, the court then took time to write an opinion, and basically that's the verdict in this case. The first thing the court did that was important is it distilled down those 5 elements we talked about earlier into its most basic form. The elements have to be this: acted recklessly, exposed private parts, under circumstances likely to be viewed by others, likely to affront others, and then finally, in the defendant's physical proximity. From there, the court then focuses in on element number 2, exposing private parts. The court determines that's the critical element here. Because the other ones, well, they're all met. Nobody's objecting to those. It's whether or not this one little piece occurred. And the court determines, nope, it didn't happen. And the court says the evidence presented to it was not sufficient enough to establish that fact beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, what evidence was presented? Well, witnesses came in particular, the women in the locker room who claimed to have seen Darren and seen his private parts, his genitals, testified. Well, remember, testimony is evidence. What a witness saw, what they heard, what they smelled, what they tasted, what happened to them. Some cases, what they may have felt. That's all evidence. It's up to a jury, or in this case, the judge, to determine their credibility and then also weigh that evidence and determine, does that evidence help meet the burden of the state? Does it satisfy the elements? It was during this testimony that we learned Darren is a rather big guy.
You're a big guy.
For you.
And that there was an excess of adipose tissue on Darren that would have prevented this witness from possibly seeing Darren's private parts. Yes, you're understanding me correctly. The judge determined Darren was too fat to have committed this crime. Now, is this bad? No. I mean, normally we'd sit there and say, wow, he was found not guilty on all accounts. Awesome job. What's not to love? But it's what was revealed in court where you kind of feel like this was a little bit personal. Because now the world knows, and this made news all over the world, that he was too fat to have committed this crime, and that Darren was too fat, and that covered up his penis. I mean, that's a pretty intimate thing, you know, and depending on how Darren feels, that could be very embarrassing. I mean, certainly it's a very personal thing to have the world know what you look like naked. And now that's a fact established in law by a court of appropriate jurisdiction, and that's on the record forever.
I rule in favor of the plaintiff. Arlen Video is hereby ordered to remove the debt from its computer. And let the record show that Mr. Hank Hill really knows his pornography.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So it makes you wonder, which is the best, to win or have the world know such private details about yourself? So that's it for today, guys. Please like, share, subscribe. Questions or comments below. Which side of this would you fall on? Would you take your chances in court and risk a conviction? Or would you rather risk the world knowing these, you know, personal and embarrassing things about you? I mean, they would be embarrassing to me. I assume slightly embarrassing to Darren. Maybe Darren doesn't care. I don't know. But they would be very embarrassing to me, and I think a lot of people would be embarrassed by that. It's a very, very personal thing. What is the world knowing that you look like naked? But let me know. And until next time, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. And Darren's not guilty. But now we got exposed to TMI. Just a little bit TMI there.